A judge has sentenced a man for manslaughter following a fatal shooting in a room at the MCM Elegante Hotel in Beaumont. Judge Lane Walker sentenced 48-year-old Lance Robert Muller this morning. He faced a sentence ranging from probation to 20 years in prison.
When a healthy, middle-aged man is found dead in a locked hotel room, no one suspects foul play. No signs of struggle, no blood, not even a bruise. The coroner calls it natural causes. Case closed, but something didn't sit right. What really happened inside room 348 of the MCM Elegante Hotel in Texas would leave even seasoned detectives stunned and expose one of the most bizarre accidental homicides ever investigated. This isn't a story about malice. It's a story about carelessness, the kind that turns routine into tragedy. September 15th, 2010. Greg Flanagan, 55, was a successful oil executive from Lafayette, Louisiana. He traveled often for work, usually staying at the same hotel when he was in Beaumont, the MCM Elegante, room 348. By all accounts, Greg was meticulous, a creature of habit. He didn't drink heavily, didn't party. He was reliable and well-liked by coworkers. That night, he had dinner, watched TV, and chatted with his wife on the phone. Then, silence. When he didn't call her the next morning, something he never missed, she knew something was wrong. She asked one of Greg's coworkers to check on him. I found the door locked from the inside. Hotel staff had to force it open. That's when they found Greg, lying on the floor between the bed and the wall, fully dressed, no signs of trauma, his briefcase, keys, wallet, untouched. The hotel room was perfectly neat. The remote was still in his hand. There was an uneaten candy bar on the nightstand. Nothing about the scene screamed emergency. Paramedics believed it was a heart attack or a stroke. Greg was a smoker, and though otherwise healthy, he was under stress like many executives in his field. But if there was no struggle, no noise, and no mess, how did this man die? The coroner discovered catastrophic internal injuries, a torn liver, 2 fractured ribs, a hole in the scrotum, internal bleeding around the heart and abdomen. His insides were essentially shredded, yet his skin was completely intact. There was no bruising, no punctures, no trauma to his clothing. It was as if the damage came from the inside out. The injuries were so severe, the medical examiner initially theorized he'd been kicked or struck with incredible force, perhaps in a bar fight. But there were no signs of a fight, and no one heard anything. Even stranger, Greg's clothing showed no rips, no residue, no signs of impact. It was as if he'd been hit by a ghost. That's when investigators hit a wall, literally. Desperate for answers, Greg's wife hired Ken Brennan, a no-nonsense former DEA agent turned private investigator. Brennan traveled to Beaumont and started at the scene, room 348. He combed through every inch. Nothing was out of place. But something about the wall next to the bed, the one separating Greg's room from the one next door, felt off. He looked at room 349. It had been occupied by 2 men, electricians working a local refinery job. They had checked out shortly after Greg's death. Police found them and questioned them again. That's when one of the men casually mentioned a weird incident. His friend's gun had gone off in the room, but it was no big deal, he said, just some minor wall damage. They patched it up themselves. That was the break investigators needed. Brennan returned to room 348 and peeled back the patched wall. Inside, they found the unthinkable, a bullet hole buried deep in the sheetrock and lodged in the far wall across the room. Greg hadn't been attacked. He had been shot through the wall while watching the TV. The bullet traveled nearly 10 feet, cleanly passing through 2 layers of drywall and insulation. It struck Greg with lethal precision, a tragic alignment of physics and fate. Maurice Reese Wallace, the man in room 349, had brought his .38 caliber revolver with him on the trip. That night, he was showing it off, loaded, and pretending to quick draw like in old westerns. One of those mock draws ended with the gun discharging. The bullet went through the wall and into Greg Flanagan's body with enough force to destroy vital organs. The impact was instant, silent, deadly. Greg probably never even knew he'd been shot. He slid off the bed and collapsed. The hotel room remained eerily quiet. Wallace and his friend, panicked, patched the hole and said nothing. They checked out the next morning, unaware they'd killed a man. Ballistics confirmed the bullet found in Greg's room matched Wallace's gun. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Wallace confessed. He was charged with manslaughter. Investigators were shocked by how easily the truth had nearly disappeared. No witness, no weapon at the scene, no motive. If not for Greg's wife refusing to accept the easy answer, the case would have ended with a shrug. Greg's wife, Susie, never believed it was just a heart attack.
Sentenced a man for manslaughter following a fatal shooting in a room at the MCM Elegante Hotel in Beaumont. Judge Lane Walker sentenced 48-year-old Lance Robert Muller this morning. Beaumont police say in September of 2010, Muller and his friends were drinking in a room at the Elegante, and he was playing around with his 9mm pistol. It fired. A bullet went through the wall and struck 55-year-old Gregory Flanagan. He died in the room. Evidence shows Muller and his friends didn't tell anyone.
And thanks to persistence, the truth surfaced, buried behind drywall and silence. But that truth came at a price. Greg's death wasn't premeditated. It wasn't personal. It was the result of carelessness, recklessness, and a moment of sheer stupidity. He died alone in a hotel room, the victim of someone else's arrogance. The kind of death no one could have predicted. And that's what makes it so disturbing. Wallace served a prison sentence. But what kind of justice fits a crime like this? There was no intent, no warning, just a man playing cowboy with a loaded gun and another man paying the ultimate price. In the end, it wasn't a locked room mystery. It was a crime hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look just a little bit deeper. Room 348 looks like any other hotel room. Beige walls, a desk, a bed. But for Susie Flanagan, it's the room that stole everything. She once said, "You don't expect to send your husband on a business trip and have him come home in a body bag. I just needed someone to ask why." And someone did. If stories like this leave you stunned, stories where truth hides in plain sight, subscribe for more true crime, because the next case might be even stranger.